Hello.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. As I was discussing, please share your Gmail ID unless you had already added to the Google Drive. In Google Drive, we have previous sessions of this batch and the other batch as well. So you can watch those sessions whenever you feel it's right time. And if you have any question, you can just ping me on WhatsApp rather than calling. I prefer message me and Anuj sir, and we might plan an extra session with you in terms of question and answer, in terms of getting your the confusion clearance. Okay, so these sessions do help in terms of revising, in terms of whatever you couldn't understand it to the final level. Okay, and that's the process we normally follow. I believe we have some 6 8 sessions till now, so we are doing this thing for around, I think, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Yeah. So that way, if you missed anything from the recording, please go through them and then we can plan extra session. Does that make sense? Anybody have any question for me at this moment?
Yes, I have.
Please go ahead, sir.
My name is Andy. You understand? And for the new people, you know, introducing myself again as Andy Okodowe from Atlanta, Georgia. I have an important event I'm attending right now. I thought it was going to be over by 9:30, but it has been extended till 10 o'clock. I won't be able to be, on this in this class right now. I don't know if you
Uh-huh.
can give permission to go so I can maybe watch the recording and catch up with you tomorrow.
No problem, sir. I can clearly understand. Please do watch the recording. I'll release on YouTube after a few hours of this session. Zoom takes some, encoding, decoding, I don't know what they call that thing. And then,
Mm.
we'll upload this thing to the YouTube and you can have a look at these things.
Okay.
Okay. And if you have any questions, sir, means even in previous sessions and all, please free to, get in touch with me on WhatsApp and I'll solve all your queries. That's our
So
commitment. Or
you
Anuj,
trust
sir.
you trust I will do that. Thank you so much for your time with us, and
Most,
thank you
most welcome, sir.
for being so simple for us to access.
No, and that's the motto, right?
Mm.
Cybersecurity is not that difficult technical topic, but yes, we need to spend some time in understanding the technicality. So I would really request you to spend some, time, research, or whatever you are good at. And this way, we can clearly understand how we can basically make in career in cybersecurity.
Okay.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions as of now?
Yes, I have one question.
Please go ahead, sir.
I was reviewing on YouTube some security associate auditor job, and that
Uh-huh.
one. What is the PCI-DSS framework?
Yes, I believe Anuj sir have explained in the last session. Anuj
Mhm.
sir, could you please explain it again? It's a card security network or money transactional security network. Anuj sir, could you please?
Yeah, hi. So just the thing is, PCI-DSS framework is a certain set of guidelines, or you can say the things that should be the do's and don'ts when it comes to the financial transaction or the payment card industry. So if an institute or a bank or an organization is dealing with personal information of the customer or the individual when it comes to the payment. Let's say, for an example, the credit card department or the debit card department. So there, what is the secure way of storing and processing the personal information of the customer, and how to do it, how to achieve it? That's what the PCI-DSS helps us in achieving those things. So it's a framework overall. Framework, as in you say the set of guidelines and the do's and don'ts. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, sure. Thanks.
And on that topic, continuing, we are going to start the basic, enactment and cybersecurity framework what we have as of today. Okay, sorry. Anybody else have any question as of now? We are good, right? Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening. So today we're going to have some security enactments and regulation. Laws is a simpler word. That's why I kept it a laws, because these are some specific, laws created by various governments, and we're going to understand it the way they've implemented in a cybersecurity era Okay, the first one is European Union General Data Protection. These are normally referred as GDPR. So in any security meeting, any cyber security discussions, if they say GDPR, it means General Data Protections Regulations. Okay, and we'll understand what is law, what is regulations, and all those things, and the difference in between them as well. Now we're going to study 3-4 different acts today. Rather, we'll understand what these acts do. I don't want you to start, studying law, but at least whenever we are auditors, how we perform, how we include these rules and regulations in our audit checklist. So if you want to make a checklist by your own, or if you want to improve your checklist on, on whatever companies has, and this is what auditor does. So what he does, he normally check the compliance, what have updated in some specific websites, be it North American government website, Canadian government website. In terms of GDPR, this is a European Union website we need to refer to, and I'll show you the site also. And we'll try to understand how we do audit, or how I can build a checklist for GDPR compliance. So when it comes to cybersecurity compliance, it includes GDPR, SOX Act, US Sarbanes Oxley Act, and some HIPAA. HIPAA's penetration or HIPAA's review depends on the attachment of your company to the healthcare industry. If it's a pharmaceutical or a hospital, or hotel, or a kind of a patient care industry, then HIPAA applies to you in the maximum maximum magnitude. Now, how do you define this magnitude? Number of checklists to be included in your audit. So if you have 5 to 10 checklist item, then it's a minimum impact. If it's kind of 20 to 50, it's median impact, and anything and above 60 is normally, or anything and above 50 is normally referred as the maximum impact in terms of applicability of these laws, verification, compliance. So compliance means, are we have a physical security to the office? This can be a compliance. Do we have cameras to the office? Now within cameras we might have 3-4 checklists. Is the camera it's a motion sensor camera? Does this have optimum resolution to identify face? Does it have so much night vision, so that during midnight or something, wherever there are maximum impact in terms of criminality, can it justify those times as well, and so on and so forth. So this way we might have a checklist which might proliferate to 2 or 3 levels, and that's a normal scenario. Okay, and we're going to understand today how we're going to build a checklist, what type of checklist we can get it from that website itself, and how we can convert it to your own domain, own company where you're working for. And this is what the auditors do. Mostly the lead auditors, they do build these checklists, they do modify these checklists, they do build these audit procedures, as we normally call it, right? So here we're going to understand a bit of legal terminology. I don't want to go too into the depth, but I'm being an advocate. This comes to me naturally. I've studied law for around 8 years, and I'm practicing it for so many years. So here we are trying to understand how we can comply with these governmental policies and procedures, so that we won't get fined, we won't get blacklisted. Believe me, if there are some good regulations, if you don't comply with it, and if you don't produce these artifacts. What are artifacts? A document can be an Excel sheet where I have a checklist. You check the gate, yes, I'll make a tick mark. And I'll mention the time there, what date and time I have checked the gate. I have checked the cameras, they are working. There are total 6 cameras within these 4 corners, and these 2 extra cameras to make sure the kind of additional security and blah 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 things. So these 6 cameras checked, their model, make, warranty, and all those things should be included in the checklist. So like that, we might have a good number of checklists, even including software, their versions, their warranty, and different logs they create. And we might have a single line saying, okay, log of CNET penetration testing have been checked, and so on, so date and time. or reviewed or audited. Depending upon your organization policies and procedure, they might use some different word. But when it comes to legal compliance with the government, we have to use this exact phrase as they've shared with you, and that's why they share with you. You can add the details after whatever phrase or sentence you have included, but still, and that's what you can say, nth level customization, but you have to have that checklist description as it is. Get it from the specific websites, and we're going to see first of all European Union General Data Protection. Okay, and we'll try to understand the history, what it does, and how we include these checklists in our day-to-day job as an auditor or a lead auditor or an analyst. Okay, and this way it's a bit of a legality type of thing, but as a cybersecurity expert, even if you're analyst, your auditor, you have to understand these few acts in terms of their summarization at least. If you want to be auditor, you can basically study these laws in detail, because there's an extra step or care required to update these audit procedures sometimes, or to guide somebody on these audit procedure, why it's needed, why not it's needed, and so on and so forth. Okay, anybody have any questions so far? Is my English simple enough for you to understand?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now
Yes.
let's go. Yeah, thank you. Let's go with the law and regulation. There's a difference between a law or enactment and a regulation. Law is what our parliament passes. Parliament says the senators which we elect, they form a body called Senate body. Now, whenever this Senate body passes a legislation saying, okay, now we need to really understand all the masses have to walk on the right side, on the left side, when it's going towards and when it's coming towards kind of scenario. If you understand these, like in Europe, you normally drive, like you drive on the left side. In North America, you drive on the right side. Are you with me? Have everybody seen these difference? Drive on the right side and drive on the left
Yes.
side?
Yes.
Same. And I think most of us from India, so India follows European model, and America follows, they have their own model called, North American model of driving, and that's how the overall enactment differs. So in India, if you drives on the right, you might be penalized, you might get your license revoked. Same in North America. If you drive on the left side, you might get penalized, because that's against the law, that's against the general society regulations created by the elected bodies. Same in Canada as well, right? So here we are trying to understand, we have to follow certain rules and regulation which are enacted by the government. Now the law is a kind of basic reference. Whenever it's get enacted, is normally referred as enactment so and so. So a name comes on it, like enactment for GDPR, enactment for Health Insurance Probability and Accountability Act. Now here, as the name suggests, it's a Health Insurance Probability and Accountability Act called HIPAA, and so on and so forth. So there's a name of enactment. Now when the enactment done, let's say 4 years down down the line, let's say this HIPAA was updated in 2015, but during COVID we had a good number of challenges with the HIPAA and the shortcomings in terms of their implementation. So what these guys does, these guys sit together, like the Senate, President, and all those things, and they update this enactment. What do you mean by they update this enactment? They're trying to understand how this enactment can reach the far east corner in terms of addressing the technicality, in terms of addressing its reach for a particular new challenge like COVID-19, and so on and so forth. So what they do, they release a rule book, because at that time they couldn't get the required quorum for the meeting, or they couldn't meet with all the senators at once. Might be due to logistical reasons, or the importance of releasing this regulation as early as it can, so that we can save the safety and health of the public at large. So like that, what they do, they release a rule, and rule is normally a perishable entity. What do you mean by that? Rules are normally created by few weeks, few months, and few days. Now these rules get what you can say expire. Unless and until you add these rules to the actual act, and that act get what you can say updated, or that act get appended, as we normally call in the legal language. And this way we might update the act or a law, but regulations, they normally come and go, or they normally enacted for a specific period of time. Whenever the government or the governmental body, it might be state or a federal, enact such rule, and these rules are within their boundary. So if a state of Missouri develops a rule for let's say 2023, it's applicable for the limits of Missouri state only. It won't be applicable to the let's say any other state like Washington, New York, and so on and so forth. For them, they might need to pass that rule in their regular meetings and all. Now let's not go into the detail of these, just understand laws and regulation. We need to follow both as an auditors. So rules are normally updated on the local state government side as well as federal government side. The laws are released to the public, and they are normally applicable throughout the region, whatever the government body have been enacted those laws. Normally, if you miss a rule, that's not a non-conformance, that's a warning, because you might have missed it, and it might be get published in the official gazette for certain few days time. Like normally, whenever the rule you have to get the rule applied, they give you a kind of levy period, they give you a kind of concessional period, like within 30 days this rule starts getting applied, and might create a warning in your state or federal audit. The enactment, they get applied, they also have a kind of levy period, which might be like 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, depending upon the enactment and the overall elected members thought process to have these laws implemented for a given region. Even the topmost body in North America can made a specific enactment for a specific state as well, because it's a federal, it's a leader of the all state, right? And that's how American Constitution have been formalized. Similarly, in Canada, we have the Prime Minister. He's a kind of leader of the elected bodies, and whatever he publishes, he can enact a particular law for a particular region as well. Now these are the framework. You don't have to go into detail. Just whenever we try to apply these things, we need to understand how we can do it effectively and how to make sure we don't miss anything. We don't miss any regulations created by the local authority. And that's why we need to look at two places, local authority and a federal authority. Can I request you one thing? If you're not speaking, could you please mute yourself? That helps out, because otherwise what I feel like somebody want to ask question to me. Okay, if you're discussing in between, no problem, but please humbly request to mute your mic. Thank you. Now yes, let's start with the GDPR. GDPR normally started in terms of history around 1990s, wherever Europe is trying to basically build an enactment to prevent its citizen privacy. Now it was a kind of privacy act came into effect at that time. Can anybody explain what they mean by privacy? Have you gone through these things? Just I want to ask you, what do you mean by privacy? Anybody, give it a thought.
Any information that is personal to you, which you don't want others to know or share.
Others to perfect. That's a really great description. Thank you. Thanks a lot, ma'am. Anyone else? Actually, that sums up all. But yes, anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, like our medical history.
Great.
Yeah, our browsing history, or where we go, or where we stay. These kind of details. We do not want
Right.
anyone to know,
Your
right?
personal
Like
address or
posting on the
something.
Facebook. Sorry?
Your personal addresses or something. I can
Yes,
understand.
yes, yes.
Perfect.
And also like
Yes.
where we stay, if we like going to a hotel, even those things are being recorded and being
Right.
tracked. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So these all are all personal information to
Right.
be
Perfectly said. Yes. Shilpa ma'am, do you want to say something?
I was going to say personal preferences and confidential
Wow.
information.
Great, great, great. Again, privacy as far as the government goes, they have a bit of a difference within themselves. Means as we see, like, personal information, when it say my name, I'll say normally Ravindra Ramesh Pandey. That's a complete name. But whenever I normally introduce, everywhere, I might say, hey, I'm Ravindra. You can call me Ravindra, you can refer to me Ravindra, and so on and so forth. Does it mean that it's what you can say, introducing yourself is against enactment? No. Now, under privacy, here we have certain levels of privacy. We have to certain understand what are shareable entities and what are non-shareable entities. Now, within everybody's gambit of understanding, this can be a different entity. Ravindra might feel like I want to call Ravi, and whenever I introduce myself, I'll say, hi, I'm Ravi. And when it comes to my documents, I mention it as a Ravindra. This thing do happen in the real world. So as far as enactment goes, we need to formulate a uniform policy, a uniform understanding of whoever wants to share their name. They might not be sharing their actual certificate name um, to the general masses, and that's also allowed. Now, these type of things, when it comes to from a governmental authority, it means certain things, or it means certain things like whenever I am doing business with others, I might need to share my certificate name as well, or wherever I'm sharing my bank details, like this bank name, the bank branch address, and some account number or some personal account details with somebody, so that they can pay me for whatever goods I have delivered, or vice versa. Now, does this mean that this excludes the transactions from the act? Well, I'll say no. As an advocate, we need to understand what type of transaction you are doing, and within gambit of that transaction, what type of data I can share with the others. Now here we are talking about data protection. So whatever I feel my personal thing is my personal thing, and I would don't like to share with others. Okay. Now, apart from this, like there are copyright. Now, whatever I have designed in this presentation, which is created as a content by me, I am the author, content creator for this presentation. So I have a sole copyright on this presentation. If somebody tries to copy it, I might sue it for under data protection or under copyright or patent law. Now these type of law also have a categorization. Now how these laws are categorized? First of all, the way we share the details with others, and we tell them, boss, I want you to follow the GDPR guidelines. What do you mean by? You have to understand whatever I am sharing with you, keep it limited to yourself. So when you say in your communication, I normally would like to include GDPR guidelines for any data sharing, whatever we have in between. So what I'll do, I'll create a kind of one-on-one understanding document, a kind of actual document which have been signed by him and me, saying, okay, whatever information exchange is going to get having between me and the other party, nobody discloses this thing to the public. And if anybody discloses, he or she will pay me a fine of, let's say, 10 pound, 100 pound, 5,000 pound. Again, depending upon the information you normally share with the other party, you might have these, no objection type of clauses from the both the party. And so what type of procedures should we follow? These are all given in the GDPR enactment and the subsequent rule. So to understand any rules or an enactment, we need to understand the basic history in terms of how these have been evolved. Now, if you ask me, I'm going to share the summary with you of these enactments so that you don't have to go and read the enactments. These enactments normally of hundreds of pages, and it's full of legal language. Might not be really easy to understand. You might have to go to the legal dictionaries and all those things. Well, the legal language is normally for each and everybody to have a single meaning of that sentence. So we use legal language to convey exact meaning, and that's why the legal English is a bit cryptic from a normal day-to-day English. Your day-to-day English, whatever we are normally communicating, can have a second meaning, can have a other meaning as well. But when it comes to legality, it normally carries only single meaning to be extracted from that legal document. That's why we use legal English for these communication purposes. Now let's try to understand the GDPR. It strengthens and unifies data protection for European citizens and addressed export of personal data outside EU, that's European Union, and data handling. Now let's try to understand the boundary or the scope of this enactment. So as it says, it's normally applicable to the European citizen. So if I'm sitting in India, ask my partner, hey partner, let's follow GDPR guideline between two of us. Now this GDPR refers to an enactment in Europe. How it can be applicable in India? Well, normally in India, we have also what you can say supporting enactment. So whenever we have in India, we have IT law. In North America, we have Information Technology Information Exchange. And this also referred as a SOX, a Sarbanes Oxley Act, where they've included an article or a number of clause saying GDPR is implemented for all these transactions when it comes to financial transaction, when it comes to transaction between two persons or two companies, and so on and so forth. So the GDPR is applicable in North America, Canada, as well as in quite a good amount of countries. Wherever they've enacted local supporting laws in terms of GDPR, because the GDPR law started getting formalized during 1990s. Its first implementation was in 2000, then it re-implemented in 2009, and actually it progressed in terms of their evolution. So when it comes to enactment, you might want to have a latest legal enactment for a GDPR. But GDPR, they go a step further, and they have actually shared the audit list with you. And I'm going to share that audit list, the link with you, so that whenever you want to update your audit for GDPR compliance, you can just copy that data and paste it into your audit body, and that comprises the audit in terms of GDPR enactment. To understand enactment, we might need to go to the enactment, the articles, and I'm going to show you the enactment also. We're going to revise this thing because GDPR is one of the most crucial entity for any data exchange to be considered when it comes to North America or Canada. So if you're sharing your bank details with somebody, you might want to have a kind of no objection, or what you can say initial participation type of document or a papers signed between you and the other. So whenever you join an organizations, they have normally included these things, like between organizations and employee, we will have GDPR for employee-employer relationship enactments. What does this mean? You can share, I am attached with so and so company name is okay, company branch is also okay, but you normally don't share the departmental information. You might be working in the Department of Accounts, Department of Cybersecurity for a company called Enterprise Rent-A-Car. But for others, we might not get that detail of your departmentalization within your company, which can be flexible, right? You might get shifted from cybersecurity to audit department or cyber analyst department, or you might have just the one department called security department or whatever it may be. But to an external outsider, You can share your company information, you might share your office address also, but you normally don't share your departmental information unless and until organization have mentioned it on your visiting card. Now, visiting card given by the employees specifically clarifies the entity which you can share with others. Even within US military, you have specifically can talk about your roles, not responsibility. You can talk about your generic level rather than specific grade as it given by the US military for your pay scales and everything. So there are certain things as an auditor, as a security expert, we need to understand. And I believe these entities do have application in terms of wherever you work for. And that's why wherever you join, they most probably have an induction workshop. What is an induction workshop? Whenever I join Enterprise Rent-A-Car, well, I joined Enterprise Rent-A-Car as an employee. This was in July 2001. There they had a kind of full week, that's 8 into 5 workshops in terms of me getting induced as an employee to a company. But when it comes to a consultant, which have a lesser access in terms of organizational data and details, they might have a smaller workshop, might be anything from 2 hours to 16 hours or something like that. Wherever you join, they share these things. These are the things you can and these are things you can't share with others. Like I can't ask you wherever you are working currently in terms of to which client. You can't disclose your client information in an interview, and that's a kind of various privacy laws as in applicable in North America as well. You can share the company name, but you can't share the exact project you are doing and something like that. But for certain revisions of enactment, there are certain leverage given to the job aspirants which are not working currently or something like that. And we'll discuss about that also whenever we are building resumes. But still, as a security expert, we need to understand what type of personal data you can share with others. Whenever you are talking about your employer's data or your personal data in terms of trying to be secure within your gambit of data privacy law. Even credit card company can check with you in terms of your social security and these and that. They also have a restriction so that they can't go to a details or asking details like your spouse middle name or any personal private information. It can be something like your they can ask you last known address for the 3 levels. They can ask you social security numbers, last 4 digit, not the complete numbers. You might have to fill a form, that's a different scenario, but they can't ask over the phone, and so on and so forth. So like that, we need to understand in terms of North American corporates, what are these things? Okay, but first let's have a look at the GDPR-info.eu. Okay, let me share this website with you where we'll try to understand how these not the checklist, this is the actual website. Could you see GDPR-info.eu on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, this is what you call General Data Protection Regulation, and this is basically supported by North America as well as Canada. But we are looking at the main site where this enactment have been formed, and this is the custodian who normally keeps this law updated for nth number of level. Okay, so if you look at GDPR, there are normally so many chapters. The enactment unit is article. ART is article. Article 5 to 11 are the principles in GDPR. Rights to data subjects in chapter 3, article 12 to 23 is basically rights of data subject. Then we have controller and processes, transfers of personal data to third country or international organizations. And this is the main entities why Google have been sued for so many billions of euros, and they have to pay before they can actually start their complete service within European regions. Believe me, this is one of the most challenging case who have been basically progressed for around 2.5 years before the European judge gave a verdict saying yes, Google is penalized for tracing their client data, for tracking their phones as well as their movements within the region, within the European region specifically, and then Google have stopped those things. Again, Google might do it this way or that way, but let's try to understand the compliance of the law. So when it comes to this European GDPR case against Google, this was specifically targeted toward the transfer of a personal data to other countries than the European Union. And that's why Google was being sued by the European government, and they won the case within the international judiciary lines as well. Okay. Now, when it comes to history of it, here they have given the complete history, not required, never asked, but they do ask what is GDPR. So GDPR is basically data protection. And there are good number of interviews where they have asked why Google has been sued by GDPR, or why Google is being sued under the GDPR enactment or a law. Is because Google have transferred the data of European citizens to their American counterparts, and that was the enactment have been preventing, and that's why they've sued for those transfer of data from European countries to non-European countries. Okay, and they've extensively fined on that as well, right? And so here you might have a look at all the history part of it. You can actually access each and every article here. Okay, so as you can see, whenever I can basically hover over it, it gives me a kind of overall understanding of it. Now when it comes to legality, I might click on these things and I go to a definition. Now this definition, as I told you, right, these are basically talks about a personal or rather specifics of whatever the phrases used in this enactment. So when it comes to personal data, what personal data means? Any information relating to an identified or identifiable nature of person or a data subject at its normally refer. An identifiable natural person is the one who can be identified directly or indirectly in a particular by reference to an identifier such as name, identification number, location data, an online identifier, or to one or more factors specific to the physical, psychological, genetic, mental, economic, culture, or social identity of that person. So if you have all these things clubbed together with one or more details, you are trying to identify a person or trying to invade one person's privacy in terms of that enactment. There are certain exceptions created for certain type of interactions, like whenever you're doing banking or whenever you're opening an account with a bank or a credit card. For a credit card request, you might have to share in combination of these entities which are mentioned here with few or more, but you can't exploit the person in terms of identifying that person in public or in a private discussions anywhere. And these are the restrictions. I know it's basically a bit of legality which is difficult to understand, but most of the organizations, whenever they say they want to implement these GDPR security guidelines, it means that you can't share complete details in terms of your personal with the other person or other organization because of certain privacy restriction implied on you, privacy restriction imposed on you. Does that make sense, or am I speaking too legal language? Can you hear me, sir, madam?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
I have a question.
Please go
Actually,
ahead.
being an auditor, what is the function of the GDPR? What is the auditor function regarding the GDPR? They have to implement the GDPR, or they have the good knowledge of the GDPR that they can check it day to day. Is there any violation or anything else? So
Great question, ma'am. Really, really great question. First of all, let me start with you. We need to understand the law in its summary. Like GDPR is basically about data protection, and that will be more than enough for most of the interview clearance time. But when it comes to implementing these GDPR guidelines, let's say you joined a startup in the
yes.
sense few of the dignitaries came together, they formulate some sort of finance, and they enacted a new company. Enacted in the sense created a new company, let's say new cybersecurity company, let's give that a name. Now when it comes to CEO CTO, they might not be a legal expert, and these are the normal scenario. There's nothing astonishing about it. So they say, hey Antaram, could you please join us and set up our GDPR guidelines. We want to, as we are dealing with quite a few European companies, might be for our raw material or a consultancy or training, we need to implement GDPR guidelines. So where do you start? You'll go to this site, gdpr.info.eu, and there they've given you this GDPR compliance list. Could you see on the screen GDPR checklist for data controllers? Yes. So these are the checklist, and as you can see, lawful basis and transparency. So the checklist can be point, conduct an information audit to determine what information you processes and who has access to it. So like these, there are around 50 odd points mentioned here, and you can go to in depth of other points also, like list of their processing. So if I click here and if I open a new thing here, they normally transport Article 30 of GDPR. That's a kind of specific article within the enactment, records for processing activities. Now you can go through it and go through these articles to understand how I can implement these restrictions. Whenever somebody says you need to implement restriction on records for processing activities for your organizations, here they have certain roles as controllers, as a receptor, and so on and so forth. And then I might need to create something like this checklist: conduct an information audit to determine what information you process, you share, or you receive, and who has access to it. Where do you store it? In some sort of a database. So who has access to that database? Well, we need to check the list, and normally whenever I do audit, is there any change in that list? If yes, then I might go to the GDPR site and check, can we give access to this person or this type of role? And that's how we normally build our audit list. You can just copy these things, frankly speaking, like this, or there's a PDF, or even Excel shared, I believe, somewhere here. So you can download that Excel and copy those Excel records to your audit checklist. Normally audit checklists are Excel sheet. Does that answer your question, ma'am, or have I missed anything?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's as simple as this most of the time. Sometime you might get something like these type of articles. So you might go to the legal department and saying, could you please refresh a checklist for me on these, legal enactments? And yes, the legal department can understand, as you are not a law graduate or you couldn't understand the legal language. So they might create a checklist for you. And this is a normal scenario. This is how an auditor basically, but if you know legality or legal English, it's well and good. Does that mean you should, get a graduation in your law or get a law degree? Not required. But at least you should have a basic understanding how these rules and laws are enacted for your given region. And as being this is a European law, not an American or Canadian law, but still it's followed throughout the cybersecurity data protection guidelines throughout North America and Canada. That's why we need to learn GDPR. Okay. But I don't want you to go into each and every article detail. Just understand, whenever you want to share data, Like I said, within the discussions, like these are elements you can and you can't share. An employee normally have an induction, be it a consultant or an employee, and they share with you, because for every business, they don't want to really they might have a different idea of their privacy, like every each of us person, right? And that way,
Yes.
similarly, they might have certain type of policies or rules inbuilt into their employee handbook. And that's what we normally going to understand whenever we join as a consultant or an employee with an organizations, and they normally share with you. And that's their responsibility by the North American and Canadian governments, state and federal, saying you have to share whatever you believe as in private. Your employee or consultant shouldn't share with others. And that's how they normally share those details by a virtue of either consultant handbook or an employee handbook or whatever they call it. They normally will share a PDF with you, which might be around 500 plus pages, believe me. And they might want you to sign on the last page saying, okay, you read and understood these things. But yes, that's the kind of security guidelines getting updated or basically followed by all these employees and consultant for a given employers within North American and Canadian regions. So yes, really great questions, and I believe we need to understand, and we need to understand in terms of whatever me as an artist want to learn, how in depth I want to go. So if you want to be auditor throughout your life, there are cybersecurity auditors who normally charge around $200 per hour within North America or Canadian region. And they are basically even legal expert also, or they have to be legal expert, because they need to guide to these organizations what type of customization of these legal entities within their checklist, which will make them foolproof. So when you give these Excel sheet to your state and federal, authorities, and believe me, in cybersecurity, you have to furnish some 6 or 7 odd checklists to the state as well as federal authorities on a regular basis, once a quarter basis. And these checklists are basically reviewed by auditors like you. If any non-compliance, found within those checklists, the state or federal government might issue a warning to you saying, within next 30 days, could you please re-audit and make sure you have compliant to these para number so, para number so, para number so, and they might share the actual link of the updated enactment also. And this is the procedure. So there are security, what you can say, what they call in North America, I forgot the name of it. It's kind of security support services given by state and federal, divisions, and they normally do these things. And that's how whenever you join an organization, you might find a local, state office or a federal office, wherever you normally send it by email or you normally submit it by a website. But this is normally done by the lead auditor for a given organization. Now, for a startup, you might be lead auditor, and then I'll work with you in terms of your state as well as federal enactment in that specific for that specific organizations. And we might set up this checklist. You get normally first, I think 9 months in most of the state in North America to get your security procedure audited and start reporting to the state and federal authorities. Same in Canada. I believe it's 1 year in Canada and 9 months in, they normally give us specific days. In Canada, it's 365 days. In North America, it's 90 days. Again, depending on your state, they might have, reduced it to 60 days, and this might happen. And we will basically see to that we comply to those requirements of a state or federal authority. And this is how, as an auditor, we need to comply. Comply in the sense you add those, enactment, you add such kind of, what you can say, point in your audits, in your regular audit. Mostly these are monthly audits, and you need to furnish 3 such a frequent audit to the state and federal authorities. Does that make sense? Anybody have any confusion here?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
Please don't stress out yourself. Mostly we need to understand what type of compliance our organization have decided to, and how to comply with the state and federal government, and to the other organizational entities or other vendors or employees as a part of your organizations. And then some of these checklists might apply, some of them might not, depending upon the nth level customization as required by a particular state. Even there are some municipal organizations like New York, Chicago and St. Louis, they have some additional requirement. If you reside in such municipality limits or county limits, you might have to comply to those checklists or addition to your checklist as well. And this is, we are talking about sharing the data points in terms of personal information as well as descriptive information. Okay, Anuj sir, do you want to add anything, sir?
No, so whatever you have explained, it's good. So just want to summarize, ma'am. GDPR, as it speaks, it is mostly revolving around the data with respect to the type of data, the storage of data, the processing data with respect to individuals or anything. So when an organization defines that a particular data is confidential or internal, then there are these controls of the GDPR that are acts onto it in terms of the security controls. And GDPR specifically, it is only for the European nationals. So what it says is, whenever as an organization or as an entity, if you are storing or processing a data of European national, irrespective of the location where you are storing it, these all GDPR controls are applicable to it. But as a standard or best practices, even the organizations in different geographies like North America, some of the Asian countries, even they look up to this GDPR controls as a best practice to follow when it comes to the data privacy part. I hope we both were able to satisfy your question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Anuj. So that's really great. Okay. Now, as an homework, I'm going to share these links with you. Please go through these things so that you can understand as a layman, not as a legal expert, what does it means to you? What type of things you might share, might not share. Just take it as an overview type of scenario, where I don't want you to be a legal expert, but at least as an auditor, when somebody asks, what do you mean by a GDPR implementation to you? And there are interviews, maximum they've asked just GDPR, not the SOX or something like that. SOX is another enactment specifically for North American federal law structure. Okay. So please go through these sites in terms of what do you mean by what is GDPR. They've given all these things in their site, so that what do you mean by data protection policies. There are something like lawfulness, fairness and transparency, purpose of limitation, data and so on. So I don't want to basically bog down with all those legality. So I'll come back to my presentation. But here, as an auditor, we should be enabled with this knowledge in terms of why we normally go with GDPR compliance, and why we normally adopt to these enactments, or why we add an European enactment with a North American gambit or a Canadian regional gambit, and so on and so forth. The other important enactment is the Health Insurance and Probability and Accountability Act, called HIPAA. Now let's try to understand in terms of why we need to comply with these as a normal cybersecurity auditor. HIPAA is basically specifically for health related purpose. So let's say you go to a doctor, let's say Dr. Brown, and you visited him or her in some good hospital, some well established hospital and something like that, and you discuss some personal challenges with her, like I might get angry quite often nowadays, and this is what my personal observation. And this is a normal thing, right? It's a normal discussion I'm having with my doctor. So doctor say, hey, okay, so what are the lifestyle changes you have adopted within last few years? You might say, yeah, I couldn't do my exercise regularly, and I'm just discussing with you. Now she might have been getting these recorded or noted somewhere so that she can guide your health challenges to the best knowledge, to her best knowledge. Now she has to have these challenges in terms to write down or to record such challenges about your health. Like Ravindra is might getting angry for last couple of weeks, so it's difficult to normally live in such understanding or shadow of such personal personal understanding of our mental state and something like that, which is basically protected by HIPAA, so that the Dr. Brown couldn't share Ravindra's information with anybody else. And this includes her colleague, her next kin or family as well. So if Dr. Brown discusses this thing with her husband, me as a patient can sue her for good number of either medical negligence as well as HIPAA compliance, and she might lose her license as a doctor's license to practice within North American region. Believe me, that's how this HIPAA is enacted, to make sure any medical practitioner shouldn't disclose any patient's information with anybody else. And these are called specifically the Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. The name is a bit different, but if you really think it through, it's more or less going in the lines of GDPR. So why don't they implement GDPR? In GDPR, they mostly talk about disclosure between persons or organizations and persons. And there, when it comes to medical practitioners, they can be a part of organizations, and they can act on particular rules and responsibility, whichever they want to ask some personal questions to you and get some detail. And this then need same thing with a legal advisor, same thing with your tax advisor, same thing with your tutor. Like all these different provisions might need some extra what you can say leverage or some concession in gathering data from a given person. And that's how you might call HIPAA as an additional expense, additional excuses or additional concessions given to the health professional to collect data. But it also imposes some additional privacy rules, so that you shouldn't as a person share this data with your organizations or with your colleagues or with your family as well, relating to a particular patient, and so on and so forth. I believe you can understand the importance of this HIPAA as far as North America as a region, as a country goes. HIPAA is enforced by a federal rule within North American regions. Specifically for North America, in Canada, we have a Health Act, which is a bit different than HIPAA, but yes, it's included almost all the HIPAA in their data sharing processes, as well as they've enhanced their GDPR for role-specific data sharing. So this way, we have a mix and match of couple of enactments, and there could be some what I can say challenges in terms of conflicts as well. So as an auditor, we might sit up, we might have a meeting with our legal department of our organizations or the seniors, where we might disclose with them like these are the audit points I want to include in these security audits. What do you think? Do they support all our state and federal guidelines as per the enactments or rules applied to our region, and so on and so forth. And believe me, for these same reason, every organizations normally have a legal department, or they hire legal legal or a legal consultant to make sure whatever you do in terms of your audits, it supports all the legal framework as well as some additional security for your own, organizations or a group of employees working in a particular physical location. And that's how all these HIPAA and GDPR compliance have to be adopted with a customization than as it is. So there is a process of implementing audit procedure, might be daily, weekly, monthly, depending upon the requirement of a region and the requirement of the organization as well. So let's say if you're working with a credit card or if you're working with foreign exchange. In foreign exchange, the rate of the, let's say dollar versus, euro might change on minutes to minutes, seconds to seconds. This is because of the demand and supply. So if there's a more demand to dollars from a European region, dollars value might get increased and vice versa. So like that, we have a kind of really strict periodic rules as far as these foreign exchange entities goes in terms of data compliance, in terms of their conversion rates, in terms of their understanding of how they can make profit in these conversions also. So there are limitations imposed by even state as well as federal enactments on all such dealings. So whenever you join an organizations, depending upon the organization types, organization work, organization product features they normally supply to the market, we will understand how these regulations in terms of HIPAA or GDPR are imposed on them, or they have adopted to choose from these enactment to make themselves secure. Does that make sense to you, or am I talking too legal here? Anybody have any question?
No.
We are good, right? And you understood the GDPR versus HIPAA. GDPR is general data protection. HIPAA is basically Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And then the most important act in terms of North American region is US Sarbanes Oxley Act. The Sarbanes can be pronounced quite differently. So that's why please don't stress on my pronunciation of these things. Let's refer it as a SOX. It's popularly called as a SOX. It's an act enacted to prevent fraudulent practices and accounting errors in a public corporation. Why this is important to you? Because this normally talk about any organizations and their users as in public, how they consume their services, how they interact with their organizations, and the accounting errors or accounting audits to be implemented for a given organization. An accounting audit for, let's say, a cable company might be different from an accounting audit of a local state government office. Because state government office are mostly non-profitable and public serving entities. When it comes to something like, cable operators, these are private operators, might be very small in terms of employee, in terms of customer base, whatnot it may be, but they have to follow certain accounting principles, like they have to get audited at least once in a 6 months, even if they make less money than let's say 10K per year, $10,000 per year. They have to be audited at least once in a 6 months, and they have to be audited with some number of auditing firms referred in the state government's website, and we have to get audited within those a number of auditors approved by the state as well as federal bodies, so that whatever audit they do in terms of your accounting principles adopted by you as an organizations are complied with the state and federal laws. And this way we have to make sure as far as normal accounting principles are applied to its best non-fraudulent practices. You might remember there was a movie as well as there is actual case where there was an accountant who was stealing pennies from every employee salary processing. Let's say if your salary is calculated as 1200.56 pennies. Now, this person, accounting person, used to steal those 6 penny from you in the name of round offs. And he did it for around 6 odd years like that without getting noticed. But then the state of, I believe state of Chicago, state of Illinois got this wing of it because one of the employee have repeatedly reported that his salary is being deducted rather than rounded off actual to its principal. The actual rounding of principal is if it's more than 5, you have to take it to the next 10th. If it's less than 5, you might take it to the previous 10th. Like if it's a 44, you might pay him 40 cents. If it's 46, you might have to pay 50. And this is a general principle in terms of mathematics to be applied to the accounting. But as we see in this employee, even at 46, he used to deduct these 6 cents and transfer it to his own account or transfer it some different ledger. He used to siphon that account to his own account. And he was doing it for 6 years. And he had made quite a good number of, $1,000. And that's how, the actual accounting department then basically taken this case with the FBI and they've traced down all these fund transfers to the last penny and then processed that guy in terms of, fraudulent accounting practices. And now throughout the North American region, there are strict rounding of guidelines for your salaries, even it to a last penny. And that's how we normally make a standardization in terms of accounting fraudulent practices. And you can, share these details with anybody and everybody, even during the interview, in terms of penny siphoning case. That's what it's normally referred. You can search in a Google also, but it was really big deal. And there was a, good, I think 2 movies basically developed on these principles and was quite famous. So you can, have a look at the actual movie as well. Again, depending upon these things, all these government agency try to build some standardization or a best practices for certain transactional purpose. And they normally have these accounting, practices as well as auditing principle implemented or modified to make sure all these organizations as well as persons follow these best practices to make sure there's no fraudulent transaction, there's no unruly sharing of data, or basically trying to curb someone's privacy for a certain reason or for certain reason which we don't have to encroach on anybody's privacy. And that's how we normally implement these security laws and regulation for a given region. Again, depending upon your state and federal governmental thought process, this might change. If you can remember, there were some sort of I think I don't know if it's a Trump administration or a Biden administration. They want to implement security cameras including in front of the toilet as well. But then it was scrubbed by the Senate in terms of we couldn't do this thing because it's basically kind of imposing on the privacy of individuals whenever they want to enter or exit the toilet. But in some state, they have certain laws so that they can even monitor your toilet from outside, not from the inside. That's a federal law. If you have a camera within your toilet walls, then you can report to the federal government or a state government saying, okay, they are encroaching on your privacy, and so on and so forth. Even within your malls, within your shops and all, you can't put a camera within the walls of your toilet, your lavatories and all those things. And there are specific strict law against doing this thing, and that's how we normally implement these guidelines to secure our citizen, to make sure our citizens feel safe. Does that make sense to you? Could you understand these examples in terms of how privacy is treated, how privacy is guarded by the federal as well as state enactments?
Yes.
Great, no problem. Any question, please feel free to ask. Okay, let me move forward. Now let's revise this GDPR, because most of the time, as far as cybersecurity expert goes, GDPR have a more gambit of applicability than the HIPAA or the SOX. But SOX is the main enactment in terms of North American region. Okay, let's go through a GDPR once more time and trying to understand in terms of different interactions or different a way of data sharing within some specific departmental need or business needs. GDPR is a regulation that requires business to protect the personal data and the privacy of the citizen for transactions that occur within EU member states, and non-compliance could cost companies dearly. Like we have discussed the Google case. The GDPR levies much to interpretations. It says companies must provide reasonable level of protection or for personal data, for example, but does not define what it constitutes reasonable. So there are some discretion given to the applicability of the reasonability of the data sharing within the gambit of your organization. This gives GDPR governing body a lot of leeway when it comes to assessing fines for the data breach and non-compliance. Okay, again, for every judicial body, for every police department and all, they have to basically share notices with you in terms of written notice, so that they want to basically start an inquiry on you. So if you get such written notices in the sense of in the way of letter, and this is not or email, as email. So you should get an email as well as a physical letter from a respective governmental body saying, okay, hey Ravindra, I want to inquire about your data sharing of your dealing with such and such company. And then they might audit me, or they might inquire into my data sharing practices and decide if I have broken or if I have basically stepped on any enactment or a compliance. And that's way it's a procedure implemented in North America as well as Canadian regions, so that you normally get a written letter and you might get email as well. The European Parliament adopted GDPR in April 2016. This is the latest, what you can say, update to the enactment, replacing an outdated data protections directive from 1995. It carries provision that require business to protect the personal data and a privacy of European citizens. Let's read privacy of any citizens for transactions of transaction that occurs within the European or within the American or a Canadian states. GDPR also regulates exportation of a personal data in and outside the country or the region. So this is important to North American solution provider as well. So when it comes to a North American service provider specifically, and this was referring to the Google case, which they have penalized heavily due to their data copied from a European counterparts to their American counterparts. ABC Corporation is a parent corporation of Google Incorporation. And normally the case was Google European counterpart have shared the user data with the ABC corporations, and they normally fought till end, saying you couldn't do these things because in Europe we don't want to share these data even to your sister concerns or a parent companies or a sister companies or a subsidiary as well. And that's how they have really stringent guidelines in terms of how you have to protect your data in terms of sharing your customer information, sharing your regional office details information with others. And that's how even in terms of those Google location tracking, which they say is their way of serving you better, is normally criticized and penalized as well. So for European region, you couldn't track anybody as far as a smartphone user, even if you're using Android. But in most of the third world country, including India, they normally are tracking each and every Android users from their location tracking services or location tracking without knowing, without or unknowingly to the users as well. And this is the practical, what you can say, grand what you can say, grand leakages of this GDPR and its applicability to these third world countries, including India, China, Japan, Russia, and so on and so forth. So yes, as an auditor, we should know these things, and that's why I shared with you. Okay, pardon me for going into in depth, because if you want to be an auditor, we have to spend some time in terms of getting our legal knowledge to a level where we can discuss such things with the interviewer or with the actual counterparts when we join an organization. And yes, I will do some additional such rounds whenever you've decided to be an auditor, or whenever you join an organizations, and we normally take it to the specifics at that time. Does that make sense? Anybody have any question for me?
Wait.
Thank you, sir. Anuj sir, do you want to add anything?
No, sir.
Hello, Prof. Hello?
Hello, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, okay. Please, today is my first day being in this class. I just want to have idea, like how long is the class, and how many times do we have it a week?
Yeah, we normally have 1.5 hours, or sometimes we might step in by 10 or 15 minutes. That's the normal, we have this class. Okay, there's, I think, one more slide I want to discuss with you in terms of, the California consumer protection and all those things as well. But if you want, we can, stop at this moment as well.
No, I'm just asking. I just want to have idea of what it is.
Sure.
It's my first
Normally,
day.
we have 1.5 hour class.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me move forward then. Then on the security, regulations, there are some state, additional enactment as well. Okay, let's go with the federal first. Federal in the sense, these enactments are copied throughout the North American region. State means they are for specific, regions. The US Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA. This is a kind of addition to the SOX, which happened around 2007 plus, wherever we started transacting in mostly website-based e-commerce transaction, where we have shifted to companies like Amazon, and online portals where we start dealing with that. And that's why they basically added these federal enactment in terms of trying to have some periodic reviews and audit in terms of additional security procedures against some bad incidents happens throughout this e-commerce website. It requires a federal agency to conduct an annual review of information security programs in terms of the criticality of data you handle as an organization. Till date, Amazon and various other e-commerce website have been penalized for sharing unlawful information with their subsidiaries most of the time. And there, this FISMA basically restricts such sharing of data. Let's say I'm a good purchaser of Amazon, or a good consumer of Amazon. Whatever I need, I normally am order from Amazon, be it Amazon Prime, Amazon Fresh, Amazon this, Amazon that, and I believe Amazon can deliver to me with the quickest possible time than the other program. than the other website. And that's a kind of, what you can say, thought process I have, or that's a kind of understanding I have in terms of my ease of life. But when it's come to Amazon, they have a separate legal entity called Amazon Prime. So when Amazon, as an Amazon.com retailer, sharing your data with Amazon Prime, they have to get your permission in terms of, either a web security privacy policy or data sharing agreement with you to make sure your Amazon consumer data can be shared with Prime, can be shared with Fresh, and all the other companies or organizations dealing in some specific category of products to be shipped to you. And this is basically what the FISMA is all about. So this FISMA makes sure any data sharing within the subsidiaries or within the parent company have to be restricted above and beyond the GDPR, above and beyond the GDPR implementation. Specifically, when it comes to GDPR doesn't really, recognize a social security number as an important entity, because in Europe, you don't have a social security number. Normally, most of the organizations within Europe, they normally track with your, passport as your governmental identity proof. And they might have, released some local identification programs within Europe, but still they don't consider social security number as a very critical entity. But within, US federal limits, US as a country, sharing your social security number is a kind of, is a wrongdoing in terms of FISMA. So whenever you're trying to share such, data elements as in social security number with any company, even your subsidiary or a parent company, it's barred by the US. Even if you want to share your, kids' social security with these companies, you have to understand, to check with your kid either orally or in written, saying, okay, can I share your social security with your school or with this person, that person, and so on and so forth. That's a kind of legal enactment which we might not follow, but your consultant, whenever you try to open your bank account with your kid on your kid's name, the bank executive might suggest you to do these things in front of him orally. And that's a kind of compliance to the FISMA as we need for a US citizen or US immigrant, whatever you are in the given scenario. And as you can see, US immigration policy is different from the European immigration policy. And so all these customization are normally included in the FISMA in terms of the citizens' data sharing within themselves or with any North American organizations or any multinational organizations for that matter as well. The data sharing mechanism with your local organization in a local company and multinational company is different. So if a company have a headquarters in Canada and a store in your vicinity, the way they treat you, the way they share your data is different from the local Walmart or the any local store for that matters. And these are all basically guided by the FISMA. I believe this is more than enough for you as a cybersecurity enthusiast, cybersecurity auditor to understand in terms of what FISMA does. Then PCI, Payment Card Industry Data Standard. PCI-DSS is basically safeguards the security of credit, debit, cash transaction in terms of within North American regions. We've discussed this in depth, so I'll just move on. And then we have California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, enacted to protect personal information that business collect. And again, this is specifically a state enactment which is applied only in California. So if you are, believe me, even in Google, if you start creating your account while you are residing in California, they clearly request you to go through this act to make sure they are not encroaching on your privacy and so on and so forth. So there are specific additions even to the state enactment also. California Privacy Act came into effect in 2008, and then specific regulations thereafter. I'll not go into that, but there are now around, I think, 12 states who have their own Privacy Act in terms of Missouri Privacy Act, New York Privacy Act. I think they call it New York State Privacy Act. The name could differ in a bit, but they have this Privacy Act above and beyond FISMA to make sure their citizen, in terms of a particular citizens, are well protected. There are also numerous local and international standard and regulation that apply to various industries, field and specialized trades also. So if you are dealing in, let's say, home mortgage, your implementation of these CCPA and FISMA is a bit different than if you are a hotel or a food serving company within different regions. So like that, there are some specific enactments we need to consider when it comes to a specific business or a specific interaction between you and that business. Does that make sense? Anybody have any confusions as of now? Hello, could you hear me?
No, we're good.
We are good, right? No problem. Now let's start compliance strategy in your in our next session, because here we'll go to the specifics of how do you create checklist, and I might show you to create a checklist in terms of GDPR implementation to the organizations you might work on. Again, those will be a kind of generic strategy how you start building compliance checklist for a given company. Okay, so please remember that we have to understand the legal terminology or acceptance of an organization as an employee to build these audit checklists, and we'll discuss this thing in a next session, that's tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. Does anybody have any questions as of me for me as of now? Anuj sir, do you want to add anything, sir? Sorry,
No, sir. So I just want to ask that whatever the questions that I have prepared and uploaded in the Google Sheet, did you guys get a chance to go through it? If you have any questions on it, you can definitely ask.
Anuj sir have shared a question and answers in terms of cybersecurity repeated interview.
I haven't had a chance to go through that yet.
But yes, please go through it, because yeah, this is a kind of repetitive or periodic review kind of scenario. So yes, we need to spend some time in terms of understanding such scenario. Okay, and that's why Anuj sir is really putting his efforts to have a kind of a unified reference point for our interview preparations also, and these are technical interview preparation, as we might say it. Okay, so please have a look at it. And if you have any questions and answer, please be ready with it so that we can answer that even during these sessions also. Or you can WhatsApp me in the group or on a personal level if you are comfortable in that way. Okay. Again, I'll repeat, please share your Gmail ID so that we can add you to these knowledge base interview questionnaires in terms of these Google Drives or these documents shared with you effectively. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for your time. Let's meet again tomorrow at 9:30. Okay, have a good night. Bye bye. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
See you.